In the year 1910, Roswell Eldridge completed his dream home. Roswell Eldridge was fabulously wealthy, but he wasn't born that way. He grew up in Hempstead, Long Island, long before Hempstead was a commuter suburb of New York City. In the 1800s, it was actually absurd to think of someone commuting from the far reaches of Hempstead, 20 miles from Manhattan. If you worked in the city, there were plenty of suburbs much closer, like Brooklyn or Queens, or even the rural parts of the Upper West Side, where goats roamed the streets and the New York Herald was praising the pure air and glimpses of the New Jersey hills as late as 1890. So Roswell lived on Long Island long before the tourists and the commuters, when most of the place was farms and woods and fishing holes. When he was a young man, he started working for his neighbors, the Udalls. The Udalls used to be farmers too, but by the 1870s, they were transportation moguls with a steamship line that connected Long Island to New York City. Roswell was just the office boy, so when he asked to marry the boss's granddaughter, the Udalls turned him down. He was the son of the town treasurer. He didn't have any money, and his family name was not impressive. But Roswell didn't take it personally. He kept working, rose up the ladder, and was eventually in charge of managing the Udall steamships. Then Roswell bought a ferry company, and then he bought 2 more. The ferry companies were incredibly lucrative. Manhattan is an island, and for a long time, the only way to get off and on was by ferry. When the Brooklyn Bridge opened in 1883, ferry traffic dipped slightly, but the bridge was really only practical for horse-drawn vehicles. Public transportation didn't connect across boroughs, which were actually separate cities at the time. You could take a Manhattan cable car across the bridge, but if you wanted to go any further into Brooklyn, you'd have to disembark and catch a trolley. Plus, it didn't take long before the bridge was swamped with traffic. Rush hour was an absolute nightmare. In 1890, 250,000 people crossed the bridge every day. And the Brooklyn Bridge was just the first of many massive suspension bridges built across New York City's rivers. Each one chipped away a little bit of ferry traffic. But Roswell Eldridge didn't care. He had sold his ferry companies at the height of the industry's success, took the profits, and went into finance. In 1894, he was finally rich enough to marry the Udall's granddaughter Louise, who was now 34 and owner of the family estate, a sprawling piece of land overlooking the Little Neck Bay on the north shore of Long Island, crowned with an enormous pink house called Saddle Rock. Once they were married, Roswell bought the adjacent property and built an even bigger and more magnificent house, which he named Eudalia. Eudalia embodied the spirit of the English countryside, which Roswell and every other rich American gentleman was obsessed with. It had miles of bridle paths, a sandy beach, and enough acreage to ensure almost absolute privacy. It had a dock for Roswell's brand new 150-foot yacht. It had immaculately tasteful gardens designed by elite landscape architect Beatrix Cadwallader Ferrand. It had an 18th century grist mill powered by the tides of the Long Island Sound. The Udalls had used it in the 1860s to make flour, which they sold wholesale. Now, it gave Eudalia just enough rural decay to imply old money timelessness. Roswell Eldridge had achieved incredible amounts of money and success. He started at the bottom and rose so far that his career had ultimately eclipsed his employers in every way. He was married to the love of his life. He spent summers in France and hunted foxes in England. He had cars and a yacht and a full staff of people who catered to his every beck and call. There was only one problem. Maybe you can even relate to this problem, even if you're not the kind of person who lives in a mansion named after your in-laws. And the problem was this: Roswell Eldridge's property taxes were really, really high.